What a wonderful day Veterans Day is.
It is.
We want to take just a moment, salute all the veterans out there and everyone who's served in the armed services. That's a very difficult thing to do, particularly in wartime. And they sure do sacrifice a lot. And, of course, Veterans Day was the original armistice day from World War I, which we don't have wars quite like World War I anymore. I mean, in terms of, tens of millions of people dying on the battlefields.
Exactly.
It was pretty horrific.
And with Veterans Day, too, just the timing of it, another thing that you tie together is the fact that it is around the midterms or after the midterms, and it just reminds you we have the right to go and vote and cast our vote, and it's these men and women who protect that. That's
right. Yeah, and we had some major things going on with the elections since the last time we were here. I mean, we were just here talking to everybody about the amendments. And I'll tell you, obviously, the whole state of Florida wasn't listening to our show because they tended to go with the when in doubt, vote yes, it seemed like.
What do you think is the psychology behind that, the mentality of more yeses? And the way that it was split, too, it was... all of them were kind of the same, what they passed by, right? The percentage?
Well, I think it was different groups, but here's my thought, because I have been thinking about that, about the psychology of it. I think people like having a little bit of a say. I think we've got a representative democracy like we talked about, where you vote for a person who then goes off to a place like Tallahassee or Washington and votes on various things as your representative.
Right.
But you don't get to vote on every little thing. But if you look at the constitutional amendments process, what they've been putting on there a lot of times has been very kind of specific issue-driven stuff. Like we had high-speed rail, and we put that on, and then the next round we took that off.
Right.
It almost seems like people are inclined to vote yes because yes means you get a say. No means you don't get a say, everything stays the same.
Exactly. That makes a lot of sense because yes means you did something. You had a part. You took some action to do something.
You got a part in government too, and I think that's the psychology that is leading towards more people voting yes.
Interesting.
Maybe then is appropriate. I don't know. I mean, it's very, a lot of these issues are very interesting. We tried hard not to go too much and tell people how we thought they ought to vote for sure. One of the ones that I think is really interesting is this restoration of the felons' voting rights. That got passed by about 70%. That's going to be really interesting because, again, you just wonder what the investment that these folks have. And some of them will be very invested, I'm sure. There are certainly people who commit felonies, particularly nonviolent felonies, and then go on to live a perfectly normal life and are productive members of society. And I think those are the people you heard on the commercials.
Sure.
But there's a lot of people who are, doing home invasions. Kidnappings, things like that, which weren't included in the list. They're going to be given their right to vote again. And if you don't know this, already down in Miami-Dade County, ballots are typically, they're a commodity. They are sold down in Miami-Dade County. And so, just like the EBT SNAP cards that everyone can get now, those get sold for 50 cents on the dollar, usually by the person that is awarded the benefits. Because they'd rather have the cash now. And they'll sell it to someone else for 50 cents on the dollar. I think in the same way, you're going to see things like ballots being sold by people who aren't invested.
And so we also have, just to mention quickly, this is related to someone who has not been convicted of the crime, but obviously the Parkland shooter, Nicholas Cruz, he reportedly registered to vote. So
there you go.
One of the parents of the victims is in an uproar, as would make sense.
Sure.
Their child has passed.
I mean, Roxanne, they only give you one vote. They only give me one vote. You want some other maniac to also get one vote?
No.
I mean, that means the maniac can kind of cancel out your vote. So anyway, we'll see what happens. I think there's going to be 1.5 million new people who are going to be eligible to vote. We're going to see how that affects the elections going forward. And certainly we've got an interesting backdrop right now to study that. And we're going to get into that in a minute when we talk about the first recount that anyone can seem to remember in the history of Florida elections for a governor or senator. So some very interesting stuff to talk about. We're going to get into that later in the show. One of the amendments that we talked about some on the show last week was the Greyhounds, doing away with Greyhound racing. And I thought there was, this is something that's particularly interesting locally here because we have the oldest continuously operating Greyhound track in the whole United States, which is Derby Lane, which will be going away in a little over 2 years now. And I think a lot of folks are happy about that. I mean, it is what it is. It's going to happen now. And they estimate that there are something like 8,000 greyhound dogs currently racing and maybe about 7,000 puppies at breeding farms, although those numbers may be a little bit high because there really isn't anyone who keeps track of that. So those are just sort of broad estimates. And just so you know, there's about 1,000 dogs that live here at Derby Lane that need to be adopted. Now, they say at this point they're not really changing their process, but just to give you an idea, they typically get about 3 inquiries. That's not applicants. That's just people calling about, hey, what would it be like to adopt a greyhound? They get about 3 a week, so that's about 150 a year. So you run that out over 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. Well, you're not getting 8,000.
No.
At this time, they've already had about 25 inquiries in the last week since it passed. So folks are more interested in it. But of course, you can expect that interest level to fall off. I mean, those are probably the folks that were listening to our show last week, and we said, hey, there's going to be an issue with getting all these dogs adopted out in 2 years because the volume just isn't there to support it. So if this is something that you're interested in that is available to you, you can call over there to Derby Lane and kind of get into the process if you want to adopt one of these greyhounds. Now, they can have a lot of health issues. They need to have some room to run. This is not a dog you want to get if you've got a small yard like me. But anyway, that's going to be available. So we'll see how that works out over the next 2 years.
I want to mention something quickly about last week. Had some friends reach out. Either they heard part of the show or they just knew what we were talking about in the show and said, hey, what did Morgan say about those amendments? And this was, obviously before Tuesday. And I said, well, let me just forward you the show, which is up on YouTube, the Morgan Streetman Show. And I did. And then I said, you know what, let me just tweet this. So many people are asking about it. And so I tweeted it, and I have to tell you, this falls in line with our voice that we have, our voice to vote, how it counts. How about our voice online? As soon as I tweeted a link to our discussion about the amendments, within a very short period of time, I lost 30 followers. Whew. I've had a stable number for the last 5 years, very stable number. So and it's not necessarily shadow banning, because the shadow banning is when it doesn't get seen. And this did get seen because it got a lot of retweets and likes. And so it just makes me wonder what kind of other funky things are going on behind the scenes that are making for your voice not to be heard in Twitter. And this was a very benign discussion about the amendments. It wasn't like do this, do that, because this is one viewpoint or supports Republicans or supports this group or that group. It was just, here's the deal. Here are the amendments. This is what it means. Yeah, it would be hard for me to imagine that they would have been able to analyze our discussion on the amendments and say we were anything. They wouldn't say necessarily. I mean, if you really thought about it from a philosophical standpoint, you'd say maybe conservative, just because he's against amending things when in doubt, right? That's a more conservative mindset. But, I mean, if you listen to it, I don't think we were highly political during that talk, and I don't think there's anything in particular. It certainly wasn't a red meat moment. We weren't talking about things that, yes, on Twitter will get you banned, like the use of the term illegal alien now will get you banned from Twitter. Right. So we weren't saying anything like that. We were just having a basic discussion. I mean, it must be me, right? It must be that they've identified me as Stinky Morgan. And now you've retweeted something from Stinky Morgan, and now you stink a little bit too, and they're going to take away some followers. And just warn you, Roxanne, you smell so nice. Don't get with Stinky Morgan, because some of that smell may wear off. Oh, that's so sad. That's the chilling effect, isn't it? It's sad, because you know what? Speak your mind. We should be able to speak our mind. I mean, do you think if these platforms held themselves out and said, hey, we're going to try to control your thoughts, we're not going to let you speak freely, this is not a free speech platform. This is a platform designed to try to change the way that you think and make it more like the way we want you to think. And if you think like us, we're going to go ahead and encourage your tweets, and we're going to get them seen. And if they were more open about that, I don't think people would participate. I don't think they would have signed up in the first place. But in any event, speaking of something that's not getting any coverage that really should get some coverage, and that's this California wildfire. I mean, that is so huge sad. News right now. Extremely sad. It's as bad as a hurricane. It's bad as a hurricane. They've got, 31 plus dead already. There may be more since the last time, 32 maybe. We got about 300 people are missing. I mean, and these are not, exact numbers because of the nature of this type of thing. Along with, they're estimating over $25 billion in damage. And it's pretty disturbing, but I would suggest that you go out there and look up what happened in Paradise, California, when Paradise basically turned into hell over the weekend. And, I mean, that's where the majority of the 300 people are missing because that fire moved through there so fast and just decimated everything.
it's really hard to even look at the pictures. I mean, and it's scary. Also, Pepperdine University down in Malibu almost got destroyed, but I think they were able to stop it, at least for now, down there in Malibu. When we come back, we've got a lot more to tell you about. We want to cover something that you probably haven't heard anywhere else, and some crazy stuff going on over in Israel and the Gaza Strip with an assassination and some airstrikes. We're also going to hit the elections and the Florida recount, and then we've got some great out there stories to really tickle your fancy when we come back on the Morgan Streetman Show.
And we're back on the Morgan Streetman Show. Roxanne Wilder with you as well. And we have so much to get to in terms of the recount, the elections, but we're going to hold off on that for just a moment because some global news that we need to know about.
Well, we like to keep you in the know on what's going on in the Middle East, and this is one you're not hearing a lot of on the news by and large. In fact, I only found it a few places, but there's some pretty serious stuff going on right now. Actually, yesterday, we're trailing them by about 7 or 8 hours, so yesterday, there was some very serious stuff going on in the Gaza Strip, and here's how it went down. Now, I've talked about that show Fauda before. You've heard me talk about that, Roxanne? Mm-hmm. Fauda?
Yes.
That just means chaos in Arabic. But Fauda is a show that they made in Israel, which I just think is an awesome show. It's about a secret IDF unit. Anyway, they were in play, apparently. This secret IDF unit was in play over the weekend because they dressed up as a bunch of Palestinian women. So they put on the full black burqas.
Right.
And they went and they were basically going to try to kidnap the leader, the supreme commander of Hamas's military infrastructure, which is in Gaza Strip. Remember, Hamas controls Gaza and the Palestinian Authority controls the West Bank. But Gaza is what we're talking about. That's that part right on the water. It's very, very little, thin little strip of land. Interestingly, where the Philistines also were located. You can read about Gaza in some of the Bible stories, actually, which is fascinating stuff. That's where Goliath came from, of all things. But anyway, the guy they were going to capture, his name is Mohammed Diaf, or Daif. I'm not sure how he says it. But in any event, he probably doesn't say it much anymore, seeing as how when they were going to capture him, a firefight broke out. Obviously, he wasn't going to go quietly, and they ended up killing him and then retreating. One IDF commando was killed, another was wounded in this fracas, and then it led to a number of airstrikes in Gaza, and by that we mean something like 60 to 100 airstrikes, and with F-16s dropping bombs and everything else. Apparently, this was all ordered by Prime Minister Netanyahu. He was in Paris at the time and came back early, so he got back to Israel late Sunday night. But the Hamas wing has begun launching a bunch of missiles over into Israel. Now, those usually aren't terribly effective, but the word on the street is that they have a plan that this is not going to be unresponded to, that they have a plan for some kind of a major attack now in Israel. And the footing, literally, right now on the Gaza Strip, the footing is a war footing right now. I mean, you're talking about 60 bombing attacks to 100 bombing attacks in one day. You've got the other side shooting missiles over and saying, hey, this was a step too far. You killed our supreme commander. Now we're going to do something spectacular to get you back. So you want to keep your eye on this because, of course, the Middle East can affect the whole rest of the world, just like, sometimes small countries are the little tinder boxes where world wars are started. And probably not even sometimes. It seems like all the times it's some small countries and their issues kind of set off a world war. So, I think we need to watch what's going on and, just keep a close eye on it because they are definitely moving to a war footing right now in Israel and Gaza Strip.
That's scary.
Yeah. Well, speaking of war footings, I mean, since these national elections, it seems like the two parties have been kind of on a war footing with each other. We were supposed to have a blue wave last week. It doesn't, would you say we had a blue wave?
I was just reading a story this weekend. I'm trying to think where I saw that. In any case, it was talking about how a lot of people are excited about the blue wave. I'm using air quotes because of the House being now the Dems have control of the House. But the Democrats who were elected, by and large, are less the extreme socialist Democrats. Now, we hear a lot about Ocasio-Cortez and, because she's so young, so she gets the headlines. Oh, look, this 20-something-year-old won. But in actuality, that's not the norm across the country. The Democrats who won are a little bit more middle of the road.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I don't think it certainly wasn't
Some
a
of them.
tsunami. Would you know? I mean, if it was a wave, it was an itty bitty one, right? It was kind of one of those little ones on the beach or something. You know, I mean, look, things are up in play right now. It seems like. I mean, first of all, you're right. The Democrats won the House. That's one thing. Now we're going to see a totally different complexion in the House because all the committee leaderships are going to switch over to being Democratic. So all of the investigations that have been going on the Republican side will cease because those committees will no longer be controlled by the Republicans. And now different investigations will start from the left. And they're already talking about those. So that's one change. So, I mean, we're going to have an embattled final 2 years of this first term of the Trump presidency. And, of course, who knows what happens in the future. But you look at places like Georgia, and you remember Stacey Abrams, who's running for governor in Georgia. Remember, we listened to a clip of hers, 3-4 weeks ago, where she talked about how the blue wave was made up of people, including undocumented migrants, which is another way of saying people who are not here legally. And we could think of other ways to say that are no longer so acceptable in polite company. Similarly, this Kyrsten Sinema, which, I mean, she's really a strange person. If you listen to some of the quotes, now I know they were probably pulling them out of context from time to time, but, I mean, some of her quotes were just kind of out there. I mean, maybe we should have her on this show sometime as one of our guests in the last segment, because I think she is a little bit out there. But she's currently leading Martha McSally. Now, you have to wonder in a state like Arizona, you know, how many people who are undocumented migrants are voting in Arizona? You know, I don't know. These are things that I wonder about. Do you want to win as a Democrat if it means having to get people who aren't legally entitled to vote able to vote for you? Is that worth it? I mean, are there any principles in any of these things?
It's a moral question that you need to ask. Sure.
It's a really important question. I mean, in my opinion, you know, we're going to get into talking about some of what's going on, you know, here in the state of Florida, which is just, it'll blow your mind. But, you know, some of the ballot stuffing, the ballot box stuffing that's going on, or at least appears to be going on, and part of the reason we can't say for sure is because the folks in charge of it have locked things down. They're not letting observers in to see things. They're not honoring the sunshine laws and giving access to information, like revealing exactly how many ballots they think they have yet to be counted. You know, and you've got all those kind of things going on here locally, but you've also got a lot of stuff going on nationally, and it causes me to wonder, as we hear about the election lawyers coming down here into Florida, Mark Elias from the Perkins Coie firm, and saying, oh, you know, there's all these ballot boxes in strange outlying areas. You know, he's acting like this is like 1850s Florida, and we got to send the horse and wagon to go pick up the ballots, you know. I mean, we've successfully counted the ballots in previous elections immediately. You notice that? I mean, the last, say, 3 elections, notice how it all worked quick? We didn't have to go find ballot boxes down in the Everglades. I mean, I
don't understand it. I really don't. I mean, during the normal election, it's machines counting, correct?
Right.
So what makes us think that a human recount is going to be better than the machine?
Yeah, well, and we're going to talk about that because right now we are getting a machine which
because we have fingers and toes, right?
I mean, apparently, exactly. I mean, I just feel like there ought to be somebody there with a little pencil just marking, you know, a little 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a cross, and 1, 2, 3, 4 slash, you know, and then somebody counts the little bundles of 5.
What are they called? The abacus with the beads. What is that called?
You know what it is, an abacus.
Abacus,
right,
that's right. Okay.
It's a joke. It's a joke that they want you to believe that, you know, I mean, with they say things like, well, Florida's a very big place, and, you know, there's a lot of outlying counties, and we got to bring things in. And, I mean, that's just not true. I mean, folks, hey, you've gone and voted. I mean, you know what happens. You drop it right into the box, right? They take that box, they take it over there, and it gets stacked up, and those things go right through the machine right then and there. And then they report that, and that's how we get those precincts reporting, and we get them by like 8 or 9 p.m. And we got 99.9% of precincts are reporting. That's because they already know how many ballots they have. The election is closed. There's no boxes and trucks coming in. There's no boxes somewhere else.
Picturing the human error. Wait, did we count these? Oh, no, wait, were these in my counted pile or my not counted pile?
Well,
it's just bedlam.
You know what's sad? I mean, you're saying that as a joke because it just makes you want to pull your hair out. That exact scenario Do you know that actually happened with a whole set of ballots down there? They weren't sure if they had counted them or not, so they just mixed them in with the rest of them, and then they decided, well, we can't throw out all those other ballots because now we don't. Because remember, now we don't know. We don't know which ballots they are because remember they go in the privacy sleeve. So once you mix them all together, you don't know which ones were maybe not supposed to be counted, right? Because that's a big part of it. I want to know, really, and if we've got any Democrats out there who are listening, I'd love for you to call us up and tell us at 888-404-1010. But I want to know, what does it mean to be a Democrat? Do you want the majority rule to carry the day? Or do you want to win no matter what the cost? I mean, I really think this is a huge issue. If you call yourself a Democrat, are you comfortable, let's say, with down in Broward County, Brenda Snipes maybe making up ballots? And we've got some stuff to tell you about that. That's really going to fire you up about that. But are you comfortable with that? If it means that you win? I mean, is Andrew Gillum the man of the people? If the only way he could win an election is by people making up ballots filled in with his name on them? Does that make him the winner? Does that make you a Democrat? Are you somebody who believes in the voice of the people? I mean, these are things that I was thinking about all weekend, and I hope you folks at home are thinking about it too, because these are big philosophical issues. And you know what? Sometimes it's more important to do the right thing than to do the expedient thing. We're going to tell you all about the Florida recount when we come back. And welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. Boy, I tell you what, we are in election mode today, and we have got some crazy stuff going on again in the state of Florida. Not 2 decades later. Remember back, I mean, some folks probably weren't even around back then, but you remember
the
back
dangling chads.
Yeah, in 2000, right, with the hanging chads. That was crazy time. Well, since then, the state legislature has put into place a protocol for recounts, and they've also said we can't have those, kind of hand-punched ballots. Everything's gone to this fill in the oval with the black pin, and it's all machine-counted. Now, some folks say that machine-counted is not as good as human hand-counted because there could be a virus in the machine. I mean, who really knows, right? I mean, whatever the machine tells you, how do you know if it was right or not right? There's no check on it. So, okay, I kind of get that, but I think given the number of people that we've got to, count their votes, which is 8 million, I mean, can you imagine the process if we did that by hand? We'd have to involve, a significant number of people in the state to actually do part of the counting.
It was interesting before the elections. I had Hillsborough County Supervisor of Elections, Craig Latimer, on a different show. And we just were going through some of the basics of voting, but we did talk a bit about voter security and the safety of voting and how it is protected. And as we were going through that, I was, okay, these are, thank goodness Craig's letting us know about this and that this is taken care of and it's so buttoned up. But in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, that's not going to be an issue. Not in the year 2018.
But here we are. Here we are again. Yeah, it looks like Governor Scott and Senator Nelson have about 15,000 votes difference between the two of them. And you're talking about 8 million people voting. So, I mean, Florida just loves to be right on the razor's edge, don't we? For those of you who say that your vote doesn't count, and I won't go into the philosophical reasons that I think that's a reasonable argument from time to time. I don't mean you shouldn't vote, but just no vote is ever decided by one vote, meaning if you didn't vote, you wouldn't technically change the outcome. But I'll tell you what, in Florida, it's getting pretty close. I mean, it may not be decided by one vote, but back in 2000, it was less than 500. Currently, right now, I think we've got the agricultural commissioner is teetering at just under 500 votes difference across the whole state. And I'm not sure whether that's leaning Democrat or Republican. Last I heard, it was kind of leaning Dem.
That was what I'd heard as well.
That lady Nikki Fried. So, talk about a close election out of 8 million folks, 500 votes difference. So, it's a pretty big deal. Now, why is it that people are saying the election is being stolen? I think this is hugely important because, of course, nobody's reporting on this. The reporting is that, Governor Scott is trying to abuse his power. He's ordering law enforcement to go down there and look. The FDLE, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, already said on Friday that they didn't think there was any allegations of fraud. Well, folks, if you're not on Twitter, you probably should be, even though you might get shadow banned, but you probably should be on there because there's some stuff you can find on Twitter that never gets reported in the mainstream media. And there's some videos out there. You need to go out there and look for these videos because, Representative Matt Gaetz, he's from Florida. He's actually from Pensacola, and he had a big part in a lot of these congressional hearings. He's a very sharp young man. He took video, and riot police actually removed him from the scene while he was taking video of trucks being loaded at the Broward supervisor's office. Now, they're just loading all these trucks. Apparently, they pulled them up to the loading dock. There were things being loaded into them, things being unloaded from them. Nobody knows for sure what it is because the Broward County Supervisor elections, a lady named Brenda Snipes, who, boy, does she have a history, but she won't let anybody know what's going on. Do you know that lady secretly counts the ballots when they open them up, the absentee ballots? They have that done allegedly in a secret room. She doesn't want any observers counting them. Well, I wonder what happens if they open it up and they find a ballot that votes a way that they don't really like. Because I don't know if you know, this lady is a committed Democrat. She's a party line, a party Democrat. She's not a progressive liberal. She's a Hillary Clinton, Debbie Wasserman Schultz type of person. But go out there and look at some of these other videos because it's not just Matt Gaetz. There's a guy named Andrew Pollack, He recorded a video also at Broward County Supervisor of Elections office. And his video shows also trucks pulling up to the building's loading dock. What are they doing? I mean, what in the world could be going on at the Supervisor of Elections office right now? Is now the time to have a new set of office furniture delivered? Do you do that the day after an election? I mean, what in the world are they doing? Then we've got another video, and this is one that's at night, and this one comes from Tim Canova. Now, you need to look up Tim Canova because he's a very interesting guy. He ran against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. He's a Bernie guy. He's a real progressive super liberal, And he took a video showing private vehicles next to a rented truck, an enterprise truck on election night, and they're moving ballots back and forth between the vehicles and the truck. Now, there is no reason for this. There's no legitimate reason for this whatsoever, unless you want to take legitimate ballots away and get rid of them and bring in illegitimate ballots from somewhere else and stuff the boxes. Otherwise, there's no reason for it. You shouldn't have all these trucks pulling up and ballots being moved back and forth between them. So let's talk a little bit more about this lady, Brenda Snipes, who's the Supervisor of Elections down there in Broward. Do you know that she has already been found by a federal judge to have violated federal and state election laws? And she has already been found earlier this year in May. There was an order that came out that determined that she illegally destroyed ballots in the 2016 congressional race, which Tim Canova was challenging because of irregularities. Remember, Tim Canova was running against party insider and DNC chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Remember that? Well, you may not remember unless you were down in Broward County, but it did get a lot of news here because it was thought that he might be able to unseat her because of a big progressive movement that was going on. Well, they counted the votes, and, you know what, Tim, sorry you didn't make it. And he said, wait a minute, I don't trust that. I want to look into this. And, of course, they're required to maintain the ballots for a certain amount of time. I think it's at a minimum of a couple of years, 22 months. But, of course, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, lackey, if I can call her that, Brenda Snipes, determined there was no need to keep those ballots for Mr. Canova's ongoing challenge of the election. And, in fact, she destroyed him so that he couldn't challenge the election. Do you know that in August of 2018, a judge actually ordered her to stop opening the absentee mail ballots in secret? I mean, this lady is all over the place. She's got multiple...
How does she keep her job?
It's what I'd like to know. How is it... What are you reading there? You got something.
Mark shared this with us. Mark Charles shared with us the things that come out of Broward County. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is on the list. David Hogg, Scott Israel, Nicholas Cruz, election fraud.
There you go. And, and I mean, this is...
And what is in the water down there in Broward County?
And it's probably some of that blue-green algae stuff. Well, anyway, did you know also, back to Brenda Snipes, because she belongs on that list somewhere. Maybe she just goes under generally election fraud there. But anyway, she accidentally posted the results of the election 30 minutes before the polls closed. I mean, it's kind of like what happened, on the, I think it was MSNBC, maybe it was CNN, but I think it was MSNBC where they posted the election, the Florida governor's election the day before, showing Andrew Gillum winning. Now, that didn't actually happen, or at least not yet, as the recount goes on. But, you really have to wonder, with somebody this untrustworthy, how can she be in charge of the elections? And, I know you haven't probably been following this quite as closely as I have, Roxanne, but have you heard the reports? And these are reports that exist from 2016, but also more recent reports from this current election, that they've actually got a room full of people with 4 people in it who are constantly filling out ballots. They're all in there to stuff the ballot boxes. That Brenda Snipes has this secret room down there with 4 people in it, and apparently this is something she's done before, and they were just filling out ballots just as fast as they could. So that's why she couldn't give anybody the number of ballots that she had, because until the absolute last moment, which I think was ruled to be 7 p.m. on Friday night, but until the absolute last moment, she had people in there filling them out, making more ballots. And is that what it means to count every vote? Because we hear that from Democrats. They want to count every vote. Well, what if it's not a real vote? Or what if it's a vote by somebody who isn't allowed to vote, or who defrauded the system, or who stole somebody else's ballot and signed their name, or who bought somebody else's ballot and signed their name? Is that democracy? I mean, if somebody who's a party operative gets a whole bunch of mail-in ballots from a whole bunch of old folks who don't know any better, fills them out just the way they want them, and turns them in, is that democracy? I mean, what do you think? I mean, I'd like to hear from you, Roxanne. Do you think this is legitimate? I don't know how they can be. This is not our country, right?
I don't understand where the controls are that allow someone who does those things and has already violated those rules, which our voting practices are something we hold so dear, that she can still be employed if that's what she's doing.
Well, I mean, and I don't want Republicans doing this. I don't want Democrats. I don't want anybody doing this. And it's so important. I mean, it just really upsets me. And I can't believe that folks are willing to just put up with this and say, well, it's helping my party and I want these people to win. And so this doesn't make me angry. Tim Canova said this isn't about right and left. It's not about Republican and Democrat, as I flitz around here looking for his exact quote. But now I'm just going to paraphrase it. Said something like, this is not about Republican and Democrat and right and left. This is about integrity and corruption. And
it's about protecting the process.
Yeah, which side do you want to be on? Do you want to be on the side of integrity, or do you want to be on the side of corruption? I mean, that's a big question. That's a big question. Well, I don't see why we should give any presumption whatsoever to Broward County Supervisor of Election of impartiality, honesty, integrity, or competence. And that's the same thing that Tim Canova said, because I was just reading from his quote. There's no reason we ought to give Brenda Snipes a presumption that she's doing the right thing here, because she's demonstrated in the past that she won't. So when the Florida Department of Law Enforcement says it doesn't want to investigate because there are no allegations of fraud, I mean, are you kidding me? Are you joking? There's not just allegations, there's federal court findings of fraud. Okay? We've got situations where a lady up in Minnesota just now got an absentee ballot. She hasn't lived in Broward County for 5 years. Okay, this is information coming in from Tim Canova, who, again, is a very progressive, liberal-oriented guy. He's not a conservative.
Did you hear the president's tweet this morning?
I did.
And he said the election should be called in favor of Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis, and that large numbers of new ballots showed up out of nowhere. Many ballots are missing or forged. An honest vote count is no longer possible. Ballots massively infected. Must go with election night.
I mean, that makes some sense to me. I mean, I certainly think we've got to have a process to be able to do a recount. But how can we trust it when we've got all this ongoing fraud out of these couple of different Democrat-controlled counties?
We've been bashing Broward for the last 15 minutes. That's where all my friends and family live. My family's from Broward. It's a lot of good people down there.
Well, Palm Beach deserves some criticism, too. The lady that's the supervisor election in Palm Beach doesn't even think she'll be able to finish the recount by this Thursday. We got some crazy stuff to talk about when we come back.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. It's time to go out there, and we're going to do a little debate of sorts today.
This is a fun one because, these guys, it's two gentlemen, and Boy, they're having some fun with their lives. They're really looking at changing things. They're saying, look, in this world today, there are so many different things that you can just make up your own mind about and be your own person in whatever way you want to be, whatever that means. And these guys are taking that to heart. The first one, you got to love this story. This is a guy named Emil Rautelband. He's 69 years old in, official Earth years. Okay, he was born 11 March of 1949. But he lives in the Netherlands, and he wants to change his age. He wants to actually legally change his birth date from March 11th of 1949 to March 11th of 1969. Now, this makes a ton of sense, doesn't it? I mean, after all, as he says, we live in a time when you can change your name and you can change your gender. So why can't I decide my own age?
I like it.
I mean, and listen to, he's got some really good reasons for it. He says, first of all, I'm being discriminated against in my opportunities for employment. When I put in a resume and it says I'm 69 years old, I'm not getting the call back. Mm-hmm. If I could put on there that I'm 49, they'll call me. I'll have a shot. And you know what? He's right. That's true.
There's another arena where that would really help him if he was able to have a 20 years docked off his age.
Now, let's get to the real reason he wants to do this, right? Because he wants to be able to legally say on Tinder that he's 49 years old. And he's got a great argument for this. He says, look, my doctors tell me I have the body of a 45-year-old, and I really consider myself to be a, quote, young god. And do you know that with a face like I've got, I will be in a luxurious position if I could put that I'm 49 years old on Tinder.
And think about that perfect person for him. His soulmate could be out there, but she's just swiped right or left or whatever way because she didn't realize that actually, even though his age says he's 69, she'd really be attracted to him if she met him and realized 49 is really where he's at.
Well, you know what's funny about this is I wonder how he would feel if all the women that he's swiping on Tinder, pick different ages for themselves. Or maybe pick the different picture because you know what? I don't want to look like I look. I'm going to change the way I look, at least on Tinder, at least online. I'm going to look like I wish I looked. Mm-hmm. What's that called? Catfishing? Something like that, right? I don't know all the terms and ins and outs of the Tinder stuff, but I think it's something like that. Now, one thing I have to say that I like about this guy, because he's got a court case going, and they're going to decide in about 4 weeks whether he's legally allowed to change his age and change his date of birth and back it up 20 or move it forward 20 years, right? Now, he's a very funny guy. He's into weird stuff. He's like a motivational speaker, and he's into neuro-linguistic programming, if you know what that is. That's like by weird guys trying to program women to date them. Oh, wow. That kind of weird. You know about that stuff. I mean, back in the early 2000s when that got hot for a while.
Right.
There were TV
Tony
shows.
Robbins? Is that a Tony Robbins thing?
It wasn't. Well, Tony may try to use NLP in some other way, but I just remember it was like there was like The Game, and there were some books and stuff that came out about like how to get women. And it was back in the early 2000s. You just use these secret words and program them, and they love you. Anyway, this guy's a master at that, obviously, and he's really slaying it on Twitter. But I wanted to point out that at least he's not a terrible hypocrite, because he's saying if this goes through, he will renounce his pension. Which, in all fairness, in all fairness, he should. He should renounce his pension if he's going to be 49 again.
As we talk about this, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I can relate to that. A little age discrimination as a mom, where I was going through the process of going to all my doctor's appointments, and they really start to beat you down. They're like, well, because of your age, this can happen and this can happen. And I thought, as you're telling the story, well, I could have shaved 5 years off, and I wouldn't have had to be a maternally advanced mom, and I could have been a little bit more relaxed and not felt not targeted, but you know what I mean. But I wouldn't have gotten the appropriate health care. Yeah. I got the better health care because of my age. Well, so you have to take the good with the bad. We are what we are.
Well, the times are changing. I mean, 69 isn't what it used to be. You know what I mean? I mean, somebody who's 69 with a lifetime of modern health care may be in a lot better shape than somebody 100 years ago. Go ahead.
You know how you hear 40 is the new 20. This is the new that. This is new. So all that guy needs to do on Tinder is write the new 49.
There you go. There you go. And then they'll just leave it to them to guess. It's somewhere
49.
Between 49 and 99, right? Somewhere in that range. Well, and here we have another story. This one out of, would you believe it, Japan. And this gentleman, I'm not even going to bother trying to pronounce his name. Maybe I will. Akihiko Kondo. Akihiko Kondo. He's 35 years old. And he's married, or at least he thinks he's married, to a virtual reality singer named Hatsune Miku. She's an animated 16-year-old. Already I've got a little bit of an issue with that, with saucer eyes and lengthy aquamarine pigtails. You know, he spent almost $20,000 to have a wedding ceremony in Tokyo that 40 people attended. And as he says,
looks pretty happy in this photo.
He's very happy. Believe me, he is thrilled with his situation at 35 years old. She wakes him up in the morning. He has a doll version of her that sleeps in the bed with him. As he says, he thinks about her every day and has always been faithful to her. He also has a holographic device that she can also manifest in that he paid about $3,000 for. That sits on his desktop. Now, what's interesting is that he got his marriage certificate from a group called Gatebox. Do you know that they have issued almost 4,000 marriage certificates for people like this gentleman who want to marry their hologram or computer program? Now, we're laughing at this, and we think this is funny now. And of course, I do want to point out that all of this started, the story does tell us, after difficult encounters with women as an anime-mad teenager. Okay, and this poor gentleman said girls would tell him to drop dead. Creepy otaku, he recalled, using a Japanese term for geeks that can carry a negative connotation. So anyway, as he got older, he felt like women were bullying him, and he never was able to make a connection with a real woman. But here's a woman who doesn't give him a hard time, doesn't bully him, never nags. Now, she can't clean up the dishes either yet, but that day's coming, of course. Now, I think this is interesting because he says he is a minority. He's a sexual minority. He doesn't want to date flesh and blood people, women, or whatever. And he says it's not right. If you're trying to talk a gay man into dating a woman or a lesbian into dating a man, that wouldn't be allowed. Diversity in society has been long called for, and I believe that we must consider all kinds of love and all kinds of happiness. So how can you force him not to love the woman or computer program that he says he loves? And, of course, this question right now sounds very funny because, you know, he's got this little hologram on his computer screen. But what happens when it's an actual body? What happens when it's like an AI robot that basically looks like a person? I mean, maybe it's even close to being indistinguishable like they say it's going to be.
Oh, there will be human-robot marriages in our lifetime.
Can you marry? Can you marry a robot? And as this gentleman says, why not? Miko-san is the woman I love, and I love her a lot, and she's the one who saved me. Miko-san. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm having a hard time anymore coming up with a reason why he shouldn't be allowed to marry a hologram.
She sounds like a sweetheart.
I can't understand why the Dutchman shouldn't be able to drop 20 years off his age so he can get on Tinder. Boy, it's a brave new world. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it. Folks, if you enjoyed listening, do me a favor and click like and subscribe down at the bottom there. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you very much. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.